All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Lambda School's mini bootcamp lesson number 2. Today, we're going to go over some of the GitHub stuff from yesterday and talk about some of the common questions we were getting in Slack. And then we're going to dive right into our first JavaScript lesson. So there's quite a bit of stuff that we're going to cover today. So we're going to move kind of fast. But the great thing with YouTube is that you can go back and rewind things and pause things, and then this archive recording will be available, so you can go back and view that as you're going through your homework. So yeah, some fun stuff that we're going to talk about today. All right, so a very important thing that you guys need to know when it comes to learning to program and learning to code is that it's kind of like they're very similar to like learning a sport. So if you think of it as like basketball, yesterday we taught you how to dribble the basketball. You are not going to be perfect at dribbling a basketball today. Today I'm going to teach you how to do a layup. And so you can go in and you'll learn the mechanics of it and the fundamentals, but you are not going to be a master at or MBA level at layups today or tonight by the end of this homework assignment. You won't. You'll know how to do one, and you might have to go back and look at your notes and practice a ton, but it's you're starting to get familiar with some of these concepts, and it just takes a lot of practice and hours and repetition to reach that level. But the great thing about it is that you can master it. It's up to you. As you work hard, as you dive in and dig in, you will be successful. It'll take longer for some people than others, just based on your backgrounds. You're all coming into this, with different backgrounds, different slates. Some of you have computer science degrees, even. Some of you, studied in college. Some of you didn't graduate high school. And that's fine, as long as you're willing to work hard and continue to study and continue to learn. Your brain can learn this stuff, and you can adapt to it, and you can get better. And through this coaching and instruction over time, you can achieve mastery of this subject and reach a level where you can, be compensated for, for this skill. So super fun. Let's see, everyone, make sure that any questions that you have, post them in the questions channel, like #questions. Make sure you're in that channel. Ask your questions in there. I have that open on an extra monitor, and so as you drop in questions, I see them, and I'll go through and address some of them. Austin will kind of ping me if there's some that I miss, because I'll be teaching, so sometimes I'll miss them as we go through. But yeah, so ask your questions in there, and then some of them I'll address. Sometimes I'll skip the question because it might take things off track, or it might be something that's not effective for me to spend our time on. So anyway, so we do kind of moderate that a little bit. So so don't be offended if we don't answer your question right away or at all. So you can always bring it up later or direct message one of us to ask. Yeah, so again, some people have had some more questions about our full-time course again, starting in February. Well, we have one that starts every month. It's 6 months long. It's 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific time, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. We cover web development, backend development, security, databases, mobile app development, lots of practical development skills, and then we dig deeper and dig into the fundamentals. So a lot of fun stuff. Capstone projects, group projects. It's very much like a live, real class, and it's free up front. It's free until you get a job making 50,000 or more. So yeah, love to have you guys apply. The people who are here, the ones that you're the people that we want in our class because you're showing initiative and you have the interest to go out and learn this stuff on your own. So anyway, we'd love to have you guys come in and apply, and people who are specifically in our mini bootcamp will expedite you through that application process, and then and everything that we are covering in the mini bootcamp gets you prepared to start our February class. So if you hang in there and do this mini bootcamp, then you'll be in a great spot. Yeah, so anyway, if you have more questions about that or want to apply or anything like that, direct message Austin or myself. All right. So I'll let Austin, I see some questions popping up about specifics of that. Austin will talk a little bit about that. We can do another little question and answer session after our lesson. But right now, we're going to dive in and talk about some code. So again, don't really code along as we do this. It's usually better if you just pay attention, take notes, and then try to do this all afterwards. You can always come back and rewind and rewatch parts of this. So. Okay, so people are asking, how did you know if you completed the other assignment correctly? So that's a good segue into what we're going to do here. So I'm going to do a screen share. And we got a lot to cover, and I go kind of fast because it is a recording. You can go back and rewatch sections. So it's a little bit different than a live classroom. So I can kind of go a little faster over topics. And as long as they're explained, fairly clearly, and the materials available, it's actually a really nice resource because you can go back and watch it 2 or 3 times, ask some questions in Slack, and it can help you really get this stuff down. And so we do move a little bit faster. Don't stress out about it. Just do your best. Just be a sponge, absorb as much as you can, and then just with patience and practice and perseverance, you'll successfully master these materials. So just hang in there, just do your best, and have fun. It's a lot of fun. All right, so let's do a screen share. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go to github.com. So again, GitHub is a company, and they have a web application. We call this a web application as opposed to a website, or it's all kind of the same thing. But a web application is like a website that's more sophisticated. So think like Facebook or Amazon or Twitter, GitHub, Netflix. Those websites have huge engineering teams that manage them. Google, search engine. But then there's so many, they have thousands of engineers that are working on these websites, and so it may seem simple on the surface, but it's incredibly sophisticated behind the scenes. And a lot of the world's brightest minds are working on these websites. And so there's a lot that goes into making a website function as smoothly as GitHub's. So. Anyway, so this is the kind of website development we teach, like building these applications, these very sophisticated websites that are, that are the major economic drivers behind these, Fortune 10 companies. Okay. So, all right. So let's go in and look at our pre-course work. So I'm going to go find the repo real quick. Pre-course. All right. I'll zoom in a little. There we go. Okay, so all right, so if we come right here, look at get. All right, so look at get. So right here, pull requests. So this is how you can tell if it worked. Okay, so if you have a pull request, so some of you might be thinking, I have a little red X next to the text, like what's going on, and does that mean that it worked? It did. If you have a line in here that you added and it says your name, then you're doing the right thing. Okay, so don't worry about the X yet. That's something that we'll talk more about later. That has to do with I did zoom in a bunch. Is that still too small? Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So anyway, so ignore the X right now. Later, when we get into some of the testing and scoring stuff, then you guys can go in and check that out. So don't worry about that right now. If this was even created, this pull request, then that means that that it's fine. So don't worry about this thing. So Travis CI, he's running some tests against your thing that you submitted, and you haven't written any of the JavaScript stuff yet. So naturally, all of your tests are failing at this point, and that's fine. If they're supposed to be failing, this is supposed to be a red X right now. So don't worry about it. So this person right here, let's see, Sims089S, they successfully did this. They have their new file.js that was submitted. And so it's cool. This pull request tells me they submitted it. Should say a time on here too somewhere where I should be able to see when they submitted. But anyway, it's 2 minutes ago was the comments. I think that's when this was submitted. So it was submitted right before we started. So so if you go to the Lambda School pre-course repo, so you have to make sure that you're under Lambda School and not under your name. Click on the pull request tab, and that's where they all are. And you can search by your username. So, or if you go under your own, you should be able to see it as well. So, yeah, fun stuff. Okay, so big mistakes that people made, or common mistakes. A lot of people cloned directly from our repo. You need to fork it first before you clone it. So again, if we do our little, and I'll review this really quick, and then we're gonna, let's see, and then we'll dive in and start going over the JavaScript stuff, because we have a lot of stuff to cover today. So again, here's our repo up in the cloud, or just on a server, sitting in a basement somewhere. Well, hopefully not a basement, but data center. And then you're going to fork it, which makes a copy. And so that's now your version. Yours, and this one's mine. So you're going to make a copy of it, and then you clone it down onto your machine. Okay, so make sure that you don't clone it directly. So if you clone it directly, then you're going to get problems when you try to push. So when you try to push your code up, sorry, my little sketchpad makes it kind of tricky to draw. But when you try to push your code up, it's going to be blocked, because we don't let people directly push to our site, because then any random person could come in and change up all of our code. And so we don't want that. And so you fork it, clone it down, you can make your changes, push them up to your repo, and then up here in the user interface on GitHub, you create a pull request, which doesn't actually merge it in, but it's a request to merge your code in with ours. And we're not going to accept it. We're not going to merge it in, but just as a good learning practice, because this is a common type of thing you would do to contribute to open source repositories, or if you're working with a company, this would be like the main code up here. And then, you fork your version, make a fix, and then submit a pull request. Some people on your team would review the pull request and then merge it in to the main one. And so this kind of a workflow is very, very common. And there's different adaptions on it, different ways of doing it. We're just diving into the basics right now. But you don't have to fork anything else for the rest of the mini bootcamp. In our full course, we have a new project every other day where you're having to do this whole fork clone thing over and over again. But once you've forked it and cloned it on your computer and then created your pull request, all you have to do, so today, all you have to do is when you write your code and make some changes, you just have to add, commit, and push it up. And when you add, commit, and push it up, it automatically updates your pull request, okay? So all you have to do today is make your changes and then do add, commit, push, add, commit, push, okay? You don't have to mess with the pull request. You don't have to do anything there. You don't have to fork or clone or do anything else. If you successfully forked and cloned and did all that stuff from yesterday, you have the repo on your local computer. Now you just have to edit the JavaScript files, and then that will update the pull request automatically as you push it up into the cloud. So, all right. So anyway, that was a common thing that we saw yesterday. Was just a little, and today just a lot of people were directly cloning from ours. So make sure you fork it and then clone. Fork, clone, fork, clone. All right. Okay, so now we're going to talk about JavaScript. Okay, so if you think about, actually, real quick, someone's asking about the difference between a commit and a push. A commit is kind of like a hard save. And then you can have a history of all these commits, and you can jump back to previous ones. And the nice thing about that is if you're working on a real website, and let's say you made a change and it generated a bug that you didn't realize was there, and it makes your code not work and your website goes down and you're losing thousands of dollars a minute, then what you do is, for the big company, you go back to, you can jump back to your previous version and get that up real quick to a working state so people can still buy your stuff. And then you go in and figure out your issues, and then you can go from there. And so it's like a hard save that allows you to jump back to a previous point in time, because these text files, all this code and everything, it's incredibly brittle, and it's it's very error prone and easy to break. And so you have to be very, very careful. And so you got to have these redundancies. So anyway, so for jumping back, there's a bunch of git commands that go into that, like reverting and doing all this stuff. But anyway, that's for another day. So, okay, so JavaScript. All right, so JavaScript was primarily a language used for web development. And when it first started out, it was only used For web development, it was only used in the browser. So again, the browser is this thing that lets me get on the internet. This thing right in here. So Chrome, Google Chrome. I highly recommend you use Google Chrome. If you have a strong preference for Mozilla Firefox, then you can use that. Otherwise, I say use Google Chrome. The new Edge, Microsoft Edge browser has some, they've made some big strides. And so the Edge browser is significantly better than the Internet Explorer browsers from before. If you're using Internet Explorer, you got to switch. You got to switch to Chrome. Chrome has the best development tools. Firefox is great too. So people will debate on whether Firefox or Chrome is better, but you don't want to be using Internet Explorer for web development, and just because the tons of compatibility issues and things they don't support, and it's a nightmare. If you're using Microsoft Edge and you really, really, really want to use it, you might be able to make it work, but I would say just download and use Chrome. Okay, so that's what JavaScript started out as. So in the browser, we have 3 different languages that we use. There's HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So HTML, and if I come in here and do a page inspect, we can come in and we can see all these, this right here, this is the web page. So this is actually called the DOM, and we'll talk more about that later, but you can see here these things called divs, and there's a head and the HTML, and it's we call this a markup, and it describes what the page should look like. So this is kind of like if we compare this to a house, this is kind of like the raw building materials. It's the wood, it's the the cement, it's the rock, it's the wiring, it's the asphalt, like around the house. It's all these different like raw materials. That's what the HTML is, and so you can build a structure. And then we have what's called CSS, and you can see that over here in the right panel, the styling. So the styling, you can see here, you can come in and you can live change things like that. Obviously, that looks hideous, but and we're going to dive into this in quite a bit, like next week, specifics of this. So right now, this is just a high-level overview of HTML and CSS, so don't worry too much about it. But so HTML is like the structure of the page. CSS controls what it looks like, how it fits together. So in our house, the CSS it's the nails and the screws, and it's the glue, and it's the paint, and it's the landscaping. It's what makes it look like a house and makes it fit together and work and be structured in the right way, and it makes it look pretty. So that's what the CSS does. The CSS controls the layout of all these raw materials. Now the JavaScript is the plumbing and the electrical wiring. The JavaScript is the stuff that makes the garage door open, makes your microwave turn on, makes it so you have lighting in the house. JavaScript controls the functionality of the page. So, if when I like on Amazon, so like if I'm on Amazon and I put something into my shopping cart, if I click on a button, JavaScript is what is taking that item and communicating with the server, putting that thing in the shopping cart. JavaScript often is doing the animations, though sometimes you can do it with the CSS too. JavaScript is all the moving parts and the logic behind the page. The fact that this has a 0 and this is a 359 and a 0, this in the 14 and 93, this information is all plugged in with JavaScript. When I click on these buttons and make things move and it changes things, that's all done with JavaScript. So JavaScript is the code that controls the functionality of the web page. That's what it started out as. It's still used that way. Initially, in the old days, JavaScript wasn't very fast, wasn't very efficient. Chrome created a program called the V8 engine that runs JavaScript, and it's very, very fast. And so the JavaScript runs very fast. It's very efficient. And that's what the Chrome browser uses. So the Google Chrome web browser uses a thing called the V8 engine. It's a C++ program. C++ is a lower level language. So don't get bogged down too much in the details here. This is more just high level. But the browser has this thing called a V8 engine that runs all the JavaScript. It is a very, very fast. And so because of these performance benefits with JavaScript, a group of people came along, and what they did is they took that V8 engine out of Chrome, and then they made it so you could execute JavaScript outside of the browser. That's what Node is. So Node.js, if you've heard of that, it's JavaScript that can run outside of the browser. We use that to make servers. And then after that, Node, that started this big rush to adapt JavaScript to every format possible to make it work everywhere. So there's now a tool called React Native, which this is what Facebook and Instagram and Airbnb and Tesla, they use this for their mobile apps. It's a tool that allows you to write JavaScript that converts into Java or Swift and Objective-C. So it allows you to create these native mobile apps, which are incredibly performant and powerful. So if you have Facebook on your phone, it's actually written initially in JavaScript. Instagram on your phone was written in JavaScript. So it's used by these major companies. And so JavaScript's used in that environment now. JavaScript can be used to make desktop applications. So Slack, if you downloaded Slack on your computer, that is made using JavaScript. And then it compiles down into the native code, but it's written in JavaScript. And you can even write it on, there's a thing called Tessels. You could do hardware if you wanted to do DIY, do it yourself, home automation stuff. You can write JavaScript with that. I know some guys that automated some drones, their flight paths and control and stuff using JavaScript with these different tools that are available. So JavaScript has become very multi-purpose, and it's a powerful language that can be used in lots of different areas, and so it's a fantastic starting language to learn. I see some people asking about Express and jQuery. There's also Angular, React, Backbone, Vue.js. These are all different libraries that are made using JavaScript that make it easier to build your applications. And so as your applications get bigger and more sophisticated, it's hard to manage an application written in just plain JavaScript. You want to use some libraries and tools, and that's a huge part of learning to become a software engineer, is learning how to take advantage of open source software, these different frameworks and libraries, and to build these larger applications. These major companies, they don't really build their stuff from scratch usually, or most of their coding, they use libraries, or sometimes they make their own libraries, but libraries and frameworks, that's how you quickly code and quickly build things. And so in our course, we go over React quite a bit. We cover React Native. We cover just tons of stuff. Actually, there's 100 different libraries and things and tools and packages that we talk about, and we get into all that in the ecosystem and different tools to use for different times. And so anyway, yeah, so some good stuff. So. Okay, so JavaScript. All right, so JavaScript is the functionality, and what it is, it's just text. So JavaScript is, you just create a text file. The extension on the end, if you think about like a JPEG, like .jpeg, or a PNG.png, or a text file, or, they have those little extensions on the end, like CSV, or, for Excel, it's like XLS or something like that. And so with text, what you're doing is, so with JavaScript, you're creating a file, and then you just give it a .js extension to it. So actually, if we come in here and look at this homework file, let me disable that red color because that looks pretty bad. So if you come down in here, you have a file called homework.js. The JS stands for JavaScript. This is a JavaScript file. Okay, and I'll be pulling this up locally too, so we can get in there and write some code on it. But so this right here is this will be where you're going to start writing your homework. This is JavaScript. It's text. It's just a bunch of just letters and characters. We use the term character because that means like letter. That means like all the different symbols. And so it's just a file of a bunch of different symbols, characters, and then the computer, if you write it the correct way, then the computer will see that it's a JavaScript file, And it's going to go in and read it when you go to run the program. And if you use the right syntax, if you write it the right way, then cool stuff happens. That's what programming is. Programming is you're writing text in a file, and then it gets the computer reads it, and it's instructions to the computer. And so you might be thinking, how does some it kind of looks like English. How do these instructions change the pixels on my screen and move the ones and zeros in the binary? And we talk all about that later in our course, but we go into the fundamentals of all that significantly in our full-time course. Right now, it's just we dive deeper as we move along. Essentially, JavaScript is a pretty high abstraction. It's kind of like JavaScript is kind of like a steering wheel, like in your car. Like you move this, or you push some buttons in your car, move the steering wheel, the shifter, and you are not manually going in and changing the configuration of the engine with your hands. It's a tool, and so it's a higher abstraction, and it's much more efficient because you pushing the gas pedal and turning a steering wheel is a lot easier than you having to get in there and try to manually shift things with the engine to make it go faster or change the direction or change the way the tires are pointing. And so it's a fast, optimized kind of an interface. And so that's kind of how JavaScript is. It sits a little higher in the stack, but that's not a bad thing. And so there's a lot of optimizations under the hood that make it so it's just easier to write, and then it runs faster, more optimized code down below in different languages. And so your JavaScript is actually written in C++. And anyway, so this is pretty theoretical, and so it's going along at a kind of a high level. But now we're going to dive in and get into a lot of the specifics here. So let's go over what these different things mean, these different commands, these different characters, and go over how we actually write it out. So. All right, so I'm going to pull up this website that it's a nice little place for me just to scratch out some JavaScript, and I can run it and see the results over here. Okay, so this is called jsbin.com. This is a good little place to come in and experiment with stuff. So, okay, so the main basic building block of JavaScript is what's called a variable. So this is one of the main things. So in JavaScript, or in programming, we have pieces of data that we're going to pass around, and we need a way to hold on to them. So there's information that we're going to be passing through our program, and variables are a way for us to be able to reference this information. So so the first thing that we're going to do here, I'm going to create a name. So we have this keyword here. This is called var. This is all right. So what this does, this is a special keyword in JavaScript, and the computer reads it, and it tells the computer, okay, I'm going to create a name for a new variable. And so var tells the computer, all right, the first name, these letters here, this is going to be a name and a reference to a piece of data. And then I do an equal sign, and then I'm going to create a string. So this is from the homework. This right here is a bunch of characters. And so there's the name John. I'll do Ben. There's my name. So var first name is equal to Ben. Okay. So Ben right here, this is what's called a string. So a string is a series of characters. So B-E-N, an uppercase B, lowercase E-N. And I have to wrap it in quotes. So I have to put it in quote marks. You can use single quotes or double quotes. Both of them are valid. But I'm just going to do single quotes here. Okay. All right, so let's create the variable. And then now later in my program, let's say I want to see this name. I want to view it as an output. I can do this thing called console.log. Okay. So console.log, we pass in whatever we put in between the parentheses, it's printed out over here to the console. So we run this, and we see the string Ben prints out, and so I can view it. And so I created a variable in memory for the program, And then we come down here and we print it out. And so Ben prints out to the console. I could do our last name, and then not last name like that. We see Ben, Nelson, both print out to the console. Okay. All right. Okay. So this is all right. So it's your first introduction to variables. And again, I'm going to be going kind of fast because you can come back and rewatch this and and review these different parts. But so there's three different types of variables that we can create. We have var, which there's different versions of JavaScript, and an older version of JavaScript called ES5, and this was more commonly used this last year. The newest version of JavaScript, we actually don't really use var very much anymore, and so we're going to declare our variables using either const or let. These different keywords. So const means we're not going to change the variable ever. Let means that we can change the variable, and I'll show you what that means to actually change it. So we run this, and it prints. It still works out. It's fine. So there's our okay. So there's const and let. So these allow us to anyway create different variables, placeholders for pieces of data. So I can do const, and I'll explain when to use which one in a little bit. So I could do something like so like let's create some more. What I'll do is I'll say const name is Fido, const age is so now we can do a number. So say for a dog, the dog is 5, so we can put a number here. So we can have a string, we can have a number. And there's some other different types that we'll be diving into and going over that in the future. Pretty much the general rule of thumb is use const, and then if you need to change the variable, then you use let. And so we're going to talk about changing the number here. So so we have the name is 5. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to increase it. So we're going to come down here and I'm going to say age is equal to age plus 1. Okay. Now I'm going to console log the age. So and I'll log out the name too. So these have to be comma separated. They're in between these parentheses for log. I'll explain what's going on here in a future lesson. But what we're doing here is this prints out, oh, see, I made it a const. And so right here we see you'll get an error assignment to constant variable. So you can't change it. I'm changing what age is. And so it doesn't like that. So I have to make it a let. And so now we see everything prints out. So let is for variables that we're going to change. Const is for a variable that we are never intending to change. And this makes it so you don't accidentally change variables in your code. It makes it so you spot it very quickly. So const and let, those are the two types of variables that we're going to be using going forward. Okay. All right. Numbers can also be negative. Obviously, it doesn't make sense to have negative age, but it does work. You can use negative numbers and all the different types of mathematical operations, which we'll talk about. So, all right, another type that I want to talk about. And up here, this is called a comment. So I do these 2 slashes, and everything I write after this line, it gets ignored by the computer, so it doesn't break anything. If I were to write all of that without the 2 slashes in front of it, it's going to break everything. And so it's because the computer reads this, it doesn't know what it means, it doesn't know how to interpret it, and so the entire thing just crashes and it doesn't run the code. And so so I put a comment there, and so this is where I can write some stuff that's not code, but it's like notes for what I'm doing. So here, we have strings, numbers, and then now we're going to talk about Boolean values or bools. Okay. So a Boolean value is either true or false. So what we can do is const likes ice cream. And so again, the variable name, there can't be spaces in it. So usually we leave the first letter lowercase, and then you'd uppercase the letters for the next words. This is called camel case. So true. All right, so if I print this out, you see true prints out, okay? Or I can do false. And so it's and so we see false prints out that time. So it's so these are called Boolean values. The reason we use those is because the two different like true and false, like going back and forth, it's this binary Boolean logic type of a system is a very fundamental to computer programming, and it's very common in a lot of the applications and things that we're going to be using. So it's this is something that we dive into more in depth, but just for right now, just it can be true or false, and you can kind of think of it as like a switch, like on or off, and you know, we use that for different reasons going on. Another thing I want to point out with console.log is you can just type in the string directly. So I type in the string directly right there, and it prints out. I could put my Boolean value in there directly, and that prints out. I can put my number in there, and it prints out. So so just anything you pass into console log like this will print out to the console, and you can view it. So that's how you can check to see what your program is doing. Okay, all right, so we've talked about variables, we've talked about strings and numbers and Boolean value, Booleans. Those are the different, some very, very basic data types, the types of things we can stick in variables. And now we're going to talk about some different types of math operators. So how we do basic math. So how do we do addition? How do we do multiplication, subtraction, division, and how we get the remainder, things like that. So we're going to talk a little bit about this. And again, because this is recorded, we do go a little fast. You know, a lot of you probably need some time to kind of work with this. You know, some of you that have more experience, you know, maybe you've done this a lot before, but you know, so it's something you can go back and reference and ask questions, and that's when you're going to get it. So just hang in there. All right, so now we're going to talk about math operators. So what we're going to do is, well, let's see, const. Let's say const x is equal to 5. Const y is equal to 10. All right, so now what we can do is we're going to say const z is equal to, and we want to add those two variables together. What we can do is we can go x plus y. Now let's console.log z. And so we run this, and it prints out the number 15. And so x is the number 5, y is the number 10, and then z is going to be the result of x plus y. The program is read left to right, top to bottom. So just like reading a book. So the computer reads it left to right, top to bottom, goes line by line through the code, processing it left to right. And then we get down here and it prints out the result, the sum right here. So, okay, so the plus sign, we just use the plus sign like that. The semicolon is like the period at the end of the line. So const, the keyword says, all right, we're creating a variable called x. We were assigning it to the number 5, and then semicolon. That's like, all right, we're done. Then we can write here const y is equal to 10, and then we're done. We're not really, I'm not going to go into that. But okay, so const z gets x plus y. So z will be assigned to the result of x plus y. So x is 5, y is 10. So you can like mentally go and substitute those in, add them together. You get the result assigned to the variable z, and we log that out. Okay. All right. So now we're going to go through and we can do multiplication with the asterisk sign. That's how we do multiplication. So this time we see 50 is the result that prints out from 5 times 10. We can do subtraction. So we get -5 because 5 minus 10 is -5. And we can do division. So the slash mark, 0.5. Okay. All right. So now there is a, so there's another operator. So those ones are, let's see. And this again, this is all in the notes that you can look at. And the equal sign is how we do the assignment. So z is equal to x divided by y, and these don't necessarily have to be in variables. I could do 10, and I'll show that in just a moment with our modulo operator. Okay, so this one is called the modulo operator. So what this is going to do is it's a percent sign, and it's going to divide the numbers, and then it's going to give us the remainder. So I'm going to change this up. I'm going to call this remainder. And what we're going to do here is I'm just going to write them in directly so you can see that. Okay, how do we do that? Okay, so constant remainder. All right, so what we're going to do here is, let's say, so 15 modulo 5. Okay. So we come in, we run that. All right, we get 0 because 15. So in 5, it divides evenly. Let's do a 6 now. 15 modulo 6, and we get 3. Because 6, you think 6 goes into 15 2 times, so 6, 12, and then there's a remainder of 3. And so this gives you the remainder. And this is a useful tool because with it, we can determine if something is even or odd. That's one of the major use cases of it. So this comes up sometimes. We use it in different types of algorithms in the future, but it's more right now, it's more just, being aware that this exists. So we get the remainder from a division. So, okay. All right. So those are, yeah, I'll blow it up a little more. See some people asking about that. There, that's probably a lot better. Okay. So modulo. Okay, so again, we have addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, the equal sign, and then modulo, or getting the remainder. Okay. All right, fun stuff. Okay, so let's dive into some other things just real quick. So in JavaScript, there are these things called global objects. So a global object is it's a keyword that's available in the language that has some different helper functions on them. And we'll talk about functions in a little bit, but it's kind of like console.log. How console.log right here is, it logs out a value, and console.log is just present everywhere in our code and we can use it. There's some other things that are available everywhere in the code. And so I'm going to do this. I'm going to say const num is equal to 5. And then I'm going to call this squared num. I'm going to change this. And so we have this thing called math, this math object, and it has a bunch of different little helper math functions. We can use it to generate semi-random numbers. This is kind of a side discussion, but it's actually incredibly difficult to generate something that's truly random. And then let's see, people are still kind of complaining about the size. I can make it a little bigger. Okay, so math, it has some different things on there that it can help. And so one of them is we're going to do power. So this allows us to take the power of two numbers. So I can take num, and then let's raise it. So I said squared num, so let's raise it to the power of 2. All right, so see 25. Cubed num. So now we're going to cube it. So the third power, so we get 125. And then just call this result so we can change it up. So, we'll raise it to the 13th power now, and we get a bigger, much bigger number. So, so we can raise numbers to the power. So num right here is 5. So this is like rating like 5 raised to the power of 13. So you can get in and do some more complex things there. You can also do rounding. So, so if num is 5.5. Then let's do math.round, and so we can round the number, and so the result will be 6 because it rounds it up. It rounds on the 5. If I do 4, it rounds down to 5. You can also tell it to always round down. So floor, math.floor. So 5.9999 will round to 5. Or you can say math.ceiling, and this is going to and it's going to round up all the time. So it will always round up. Okay, so ceiling, floor, power. So just some different types of mathematical operations that that you may encounter with different things that you need to do. So again, the dot here. So with math, math is like it's like a book or a little collection of different little helper functions on it. And so it's called an object in JavaScript, and it has different functions on it. And dot, this is how we access the different functions on it. And we'll dive into objects quite a bit later. So we'll be diving into that a lot in a future lesson. So it ramps up pretty fast, the speed of what we're doing. But yeah, we'll be going over the that stuff later. Okay, so math, ceiling. Okay, so these were some of the main things we wanted to talk about. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about strings a little bit more. Okay, so we're going to talk about a property that is on all strings. So if I do const name and do Ben, do a longer one. So Lambda school, I can put a space in it, and everything that is between the two quote marks is part of the string. And then we'll print that out. So I'll clear this, run it. We see Lambda school prints out. Okay. All right. So Lambda school is a string. We print it out. Okay. So something we can do too is there is a property on all strings. There's a property on all strings that yeah. Sorry, I got distracted by a joke someone made in there. So okay. Yeah, so if you're wondering, JavaScript and Java are actually very, very different languages. Sometimes, like when we're teaching this, we'll see people in Slack interchangeably using the two and think like, oh, like I'm doing Slack, or sorry, I'm doing Java. Or people thinking that they're learning Java. So this is JavaScript, very, very different from Java. JavaScript. The reason JavaScript is called JavaScript is it was a marketing stunt at the time. They called it JavaScript to capitalize on the popularity of Java, and some of the syntax is kind of similar, but they're fundamentally very different. And so yeah, anyway, I see some people asking about different things that we're going to do in the language. Arrays, objects, those exist in JavaScript. Functions, for loops, if statements. So if you're familiar with other programming languages, all these things, we're going to cover those in future lessons. So yeah, now we're just very basics of variables and math operations and things like that. So all right, so we have our string, Lambda school name, printing it out. Okay, so now we can get the number of characters that are in the string. And so there's a property on all strings called length, and I do dot length. This one we don't use parentheses. We don't put parentheses on it. That's just for functions. This one, this property is it's not a function, but it's a property on all strings. And so name dot length, and that prints out the number 13 because there are 13 characters in it. There, we'll get off of an unlucky 13. We'll just do that. There, 14. All right, so if I did const my name, then if I come down here and log that one out, the length, I'm going to get 3. So 3 characters in this string. There are 14 characters in this other string. And so this is something that comes into play later when we're doing stuff stuff that we're going to be doing later with for loops and iteration and stuff like that, but don't worry about that too much. Okay. All right. So now we're going to break down functions. You're not really going to be writing functions today, but it's going to be part of your homework. So we're going to talk about functions, and then we're going to talk about if statements before we finish up. Okay. All right, and then I'll walk you through how to run the homework. So, okay, so in JavaScript we have a thing called a function. So a function. So if we break down a variable, so we have const x equal to 5, const name is equal to Ben, const likes ice cream is equal to true. So we have numbers, strings, Boolean values. There's another thing that we can use in JavaScript that we can assign to variables. We can use what's called a function. So a function it's like a block of code. It's like if we took all of this code and put it under a variable name that we can run later and run repeatedly. And so it's like we can package up some code and we can run it over and over again. And it's a little like black box that we can reuse, and we can give it an input and it gives us an output. If you think back to math, that you did in school, functions in your math class where you pass in a number and then there's an equation that mutates the number and gives you an output. It's the same concept, but it has to do with code. So if that analogy, if that confuses you, then don't worry about it. So we'll walk through this and walk through it a bunch, and then it'll make more sense. So all right, so I'm going to define a function here. So I'm going to call this function, let's see, square number. There's a couple different parts to this. We have function, the function keyword. There's a few different ways to write functions, and we'll go over that later. But right now, this is the way we're going to write functions. So we have the function keyword. And so the function keyword, it denotes that it tells the computer that we're going to be creating a function. Just like const says we're making a variable, function, the function keyword tells the computer we're making a function. And so this name becomes the variable name that we're going to use to refer to this function. Then the next thing, we have these parentheses. The parentheses are where we write the input to the function. So the stuff that's going to go into the function. And then the curly braces, this defines the code or the instructions that we're going to run over and over again, or as much as we want. So right here, I'll just put input. We call this a parameter. This is a placeholder for stuff that's coming in. It's kind of like, this is like a template. It's like a code template that we can reuse. And then I'm just going to console.log the inputs for right now. So this is a function definition. We defined a function right here. And now we can reuse this block of code all throughout our file, as many places as we want. So down here, I'm going to say square number. And then I'm going to pass in a number. I'll say the number 5. So now, as I run this, and I'm going to get rid of this stuff up here, just clear this up. So we run it, and we see the number 5 was run. So here, what's going on this line? Square number references this reference up here, this variable. It's like a variable. It references the function that we defined up here. And then the open close parentheses say run the function. So we're going to run the function. We're going to pass in the number 5, and the 5 is going to be the input, and then it's going to get printed out. But then we can reuse it. We can run the function multiple times. So here I'll do the number 15, and then here I'll do 25. And so we can run this function 3 times, as many times as we want. So we see 5, 15, 25. We run it 3 times. Okay, so now let's actually square the number. So what we can do is, let's say const squared number is equal to math.how input 2. All right, so we could write it out like that, or if we wanted, we could just do input times input, just to square it either way. And now let's log out the squared number. Okay, so you see 25, 225, 625. And so, this first one, it passes in a 5, it gets squared, and then we log it out. Here we pass in 15, it gets squared, and then we log it out. 25 gets squared, and we log it out. So we can see here that we're passing in these different values to the function. It's like a template. And each time it runs this block of code, we can run it multiple times, but the input variable is changing. And each time we run it, it's going to refer to a different number, whatever we passed in. We can call this, let's call this multiply. And then we're going to pass in 2 numbers here. So I'm going to say 10, negative 15, and 45. So I'm going to pass in some numbers. And so we can use multiple, we can pass in multiple arguments. And so we're going to create 2 placeholders for these values that are coming in. Again, these are called parameters. So we're going to create 2 parameters, one called x, one called y. And then we're going to log out x times y. And let's write this out here. I don't want to make that too confusing. So again, I know this is kind of fast, but you can come and rewatch this and just hang in there. And So we'll come through, run this. We pass in a 5 and a 10, x and a y, x times y, 5 times 10. So then we log out the product. So multiply again refers to this block of code. We pass in 5 and 10, multiply that, print it out, we get 50. We run it again with 5 and negative 15. Run it again with 25 and 45. So it's like this template. We're reusing it, passing in the numbers. We rerun that code, and we print it out. So right now, all we're doing is we're just logging something inside of the function. So the function can actually return things. And so when we evoke it, the thing can evaluate, and it can return something. So what we're going to do here is, instead of logging the product inside of the function, what we're going to do is we're going to say return product. The return is another keyword in JavaScript. These purple ones, those are keywords. So return tells JavaScript, okay, in this function, when we see the return word, the function's going to end. It's going to be done. It's not going to run anymore. And then it's going to take whatever is to the right of the return statement, and that is what that is what this expression right here is going to evaluate to, the function call, what it's going to be at the end. So if I do const result right there, I'll call this result 1. I come down here and print it out. So result 1, we clear this, run it, we see 50. Okay, so multiply of 5 and 10, it produced this number. It passed in 5 and 10. They were multiplied. It was the product was returned. And the result 1, the variable was assigned to the number 50. And so it gets returned. And so again, the return stops the function, it kills the function, and then takes whatever is to the right of the return and before the semicolon, and it gives it back to wherever the function was being called at. So here we call the function with 5 and 10, and it gives us back the number 50 that we store in the result 1 variable. So down here, we're going to say const result 2. And this is the hardest thing from today, probably. So just hang in there. It's something that'll become, just with lots of practice, it'll become second nature. And you're really going to learn it when you start doing the homework. Watching the lectures, it's not really going to stick. Like, you'll watch, you'll kind of think you get it, or maybe you're kind of confused. But then when you start working on the homework, then you'll discover questions. Then you come to us, we answer your questions, or or people answer it. You work together in the group chat, and then you go back and work on your homework. And that cycle, that's how you learn it. And so right now, we try not to make the lectures too long, because if you have a 3-hour long lecture, you stop paying attention, it becomes difficult to absorb the information. And so you have to just get in there and start playing around with it and messing with it. And that's when it really starts to stick. So result 1, result 2, result 3. So I'm going to print those out. And we see 5, negative 225, and 1125. So multiply those numbers together. We assign them. Now we're printing them out. And again, there's always different ways you can write this. Some of you might be watching and think like, oh, I can come in and so you might be watching and thinking like, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Saw some comments and that made me kind of get lost for a second. So anyway, the function stuff, you're not going to be writing any functions today, but you're going to be writing code inside of functions. And I'll show you how that works and how to run your homework. Let's see, someone's asking, what is the value that's stored in product? So when it returns right here, when we hit return and it finishes up running the first time, it's actually gone. It's deleted from memory. So the computer forgets it and it's cleared up. And we come down here and run it again. So then it comes up and it runs the function again, generates a new product, returns it, and then it releases the product from memory and it's forgotten and it's gone again. So that's a really good question. And the memory management and what memory even is and all that, we get into that a lot more in depth later on. But okay. All right. So functions. All right. One last thing we're going to talk about here. And again, this is all covered in the descriptions in the assignment as well. And then you can come back and rewatch this. Oh yeah, a different thing too, something I want to specify is variables that you create inside of the function, they're stuck in there. They're trapped in there. So I'm going to, well, I'll create a new function. Oops. So function foo, and if I say const x is equal to 5, if I try to console.log x down here, it's going to print out error, and it says x is not defined. And so it's because x lives inside of the function, and we can't see inside of it. But with a function, the function can see out, though. So if I put this 5 right here, I did console.log x like this, and then I invoke foo. So right here I'm calling foo. This is me calling the function. So the way this works is in the code, it creates a variable called x equal to the number 5. It creates a function, and then it doesn't run it yet. It doesn't run this line yet. It skips down to here, and then it sees the word foo, which references the name of the function, and then the open close parentheses, so it runs it. It runs the function. The function is then going to call and print out x. And so we see that 5 works here. So so this is this idea. This is called scope. And again, this is very high level, but this is something that we'll be touching later. So a function can see out, but you can't see into it. If I have another function here, const y is equal to 10, or let me define the y up in this other function. So y is equal to 10, and I'm just mashing the keyboard. If I try to print out y inside of this function, it's not going to work. So the function can't see inside of another function. Functions can see out. Nothing can see in, and this function cannot see inside of this other function. You can nest functions inside of each other. Well, that's getting into some more advanced areas, but functions cannot see inside of each other, and you can't see inside of it. So, and that's called scope. So it's locked in there. So when you're working on your homework, you'll have a bunch of functions that we've written for you, and then you're going to be writing out the code inside of the function. And the code you write in each function is encapsulated in there, and it's not going other functions in the file won't be able to touch it and mess with it. And that's good. We want it to be like that because that helps keep things organized. Real quick thing too, just to make sure this is clear. So if I say const x is equal to 5, and then if I tried to log it out right here. So again, you have to remember the program's being read from left to right, top to bottom. So it's going to come along and it's going to say run x. And this is not going to work because x does not exist at this point in time. So the computer is going to go, line by line, character by character, and it's going to come here. And then it doesn't know about an x yet, so it's going to fail. And so, so the variable has to be defined before it's used. There's some different with variable hoisting, and again, more advanced stuff we can get into there. And so, some people might bring up some questions or different exceptions. There are like different little exceptions, and and that's something more advanced for another day. But just you have to define the variable before you use it. Same with your functions. And again, there's different types of functions, different ways of writing them. All right, so real quick, I want to talk about an if statement. So an if statement is where we can have branching logic in our code. So it's, if you can think of your code as like this line that's like going along, an if statement allows us to go one of two directions. And so we can branch off and go down one way. And so it's like a fork in the road. And we'll learn about some other things in the future called for loops, where you get to them and it's a loop where you're going to go in circles and repeat the same piece of code for a little bit of time before you continue on. So if statements are like a fork in the road. For loops around let you run in circles. Okay, real quick, these are some advanced things I see some people asking about. Does JS support anonymous functions? Yes, that's actually what a Lambda function is in some languages. And so Lambda is cool. Anyway, so we'll talk about anonymous functions another day. People are asking about Chrome developer tools. Again, don't stress about this if you don't understand what I'm saying right now. This is just a quick little shout out for some people asking some more advanced questions. Developer tools in Chrome, yes, that's a great place to run your code. Prototypes in JS, yes, and that's a more advanced concept that has to do with prototypal inheritance and global objects, and we use that with classes and pseudo-classical instantiation. And anyway, so don't let that be confused. But yeah, those lead into some more advanced concepts. All right. So again, if all that stuff was gibberish to you, don't stress about it. That's beyond the scope of today's lesson. All right, so let's talk about an if statement. So say const age is equal to 35, and then actually let's make a function. All right, so function can drive. All right, and then it's going to take in an age. All right, so there's a function that we're going to run, and then we can reuse it later. So can drive, and so we'll get an age, and then what we're going to say is const user can drive is equal to well, actually no, never mind. Sorry, I'm writing this the wrong way. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say if age is greater than or equal to, so greater than or equal to. There's also less than or equal to, or just greater than or less than. These are some other operators. So if age is greater than or equal to 16, then return true. Else, return false. Okay, so again, there's some ways you can simplify this and stuff like that, but for today, this is what we're doing. So, so if the age is greater than or equal to 16, then it's going to run this block. If this is false, then it's going to run this block. So if I come down here, I can say const can I drive is equal to can drive. We'll say 15. Log can I drive, and it's false. So because again, what happens, 15 comes in, age references the number 15, it comes down here, and it says, all right, 15 greater than or equal to 16. That's a false expression. So this right here is false, so it skips, the if statement skips this block, and it comes down and it runs this one, and then it returns false. If I change this age to 16, see it prints true that time. So again, 16 is greater than or equal to 16. That's true. So it runs the first block and just runs the first block. So if this is true, then it will run this first part, and that will be just run that part. If this is false, then it will only run the second part. Okay, so it's like a fork in the road. And so that's what we're doing with our if statements here. So if else. So if this is true, then do this. Else or otherwise, then run this part. Okay. All right. So there's been a lot of stuff we've talked about today. We've talked about variables. We've talked about the different data types. We've talked about functions. Talked about mathematical operators and how to do simple math problems. And then we've talked about control flow, some basic control flow with an if statement. So now we're going to talk through how to run your homework and how to go through and do some of those assignments. And then we will, and then we'll, be building on this foundation tomorrow and just be adding more and more JavaScript onto this. So it's, we're moving at a pretty fast pace. So this is tricky stuff. So just hang in there, do your best. The stuff that we're covering, when I did this in college, everything we covered today, was maybe 2 or 3 weeks of class, so it is congested, it's simplified, but our approach is we start with, more practical and then dig deeper into some of the more advanced fundamentals. And so, we talk more about like memory and call stack and all that stuff, later on once you kind of get this stuff down, because then it's, so it's a little more, a little more approachable. But JavaScript's a good first language to start with. All right, so now let's go through and let's take a look at how we actually how you're actually going to do the homework today. So let's jump back in here and look at our friend, the terminal. And just ignore all this stuff for just a moment. Okay, right. So I'm in the assignment that I cloned yesterday. All right, so there was lesson 1 Git. All right, so today you're going to be going into this next folder. Okay, but the first thing you have to do is we have this file called package.json. So package.json, this file, what this is doing, you don't edit anything in it, but what package.json does is it has, it's like the ingredients list on a recipe, and it tells our computer what files, what open source repositories, what open source tools this project needs to run. And so it's like some different ingredients that it needs to work. And so when you install Node on your computer, it also adds a tool called npm. It kind of stands for Node Package. It doesn't technically stand for anything like for legal reasons, but it's Node Package Manager essentially is what it means. And so what you can do is you can do npm space and then install. And then if you're in the same folder as the package.json, when you run this, it's going to read the package.json and it's going to go out on the internet and it's going to grab all the stuff that that we need and it's going to install it. So let me run that real quick. I did this earlier, so I'm going to delete this folder of all the stuff that it brought in. Okay, so node modules is the folder that it creates. So all right, so with package, we have our package.json. I'm in the folder with all of our different assignment folders. The package.json's in here. The main README is in here. So now I'm going to do npm install. That's all I say is npm install. npm is going to look at the package.json file, and then it's going to go out and install all this stuff. That took me a couple seconds, 5.5 seconds. On your computer, it might take a lot longer. So my computer's pretty fast, so I did it pretty quick. Sometimes it can take a minute or two, depending on the operating system and how you're doing it. Sometimes I've seen it take a minute or two for some people. So depending on your environment, there's a lot of different factors. So don't stress if it doesn't do it as fast as that just happened. But so we do npm install. Now I type in ls, and we see that it created this node modules folder. Node modules folder wasn't there before, but now it is. Don't ever change anything in there. You don't need to go in there. Node modules just has a whole bunch of stuff that it downloaded into that folder that our program is going to be using to test your code to make it work. We used to do this on a Replit on an online tool. And this is a little harder to get up and going with, but the advantage to this is it helps you be familiar with the command line. This helps you be more familiar with the command line. So actually, you know what? I'm sorry, I just realized nobody has Node installed yet. So your npm won't work. So you're going to have to go and install Node. Node, again, is that C++ JavaScript tool that exists so you can run your JavaScript outside of the browser. So you're going to have to install Node. That's in the instructions. So that's in the instructions. It'll have a link for it. So again, when you're working through the homework after this lecture, and again, be careful about getting bogged down working on stuff during the lecture, because then it can make it tricky. Yeah, so none of you have Node yet on your computer. So you go install Node. Node brings npm with it. Okay. All right. So now, so I've installed that. So now I'm going to go into this folder right here. So now I'm in here. ls. Okay. So I have my README, and I'll pull the README up in the browser so it's a little easier to read. The README, this has all the stuff for everything we covered today: variables, strings, numbers, booleans, math, the math.pow and all that stuff, .length, functions, all a bunch of stuff on functions, control flow and comparison operators. So like greater than or less than and all that. So, okay. And then it has the place where you can download and install Node.js down here. So This is where you come in and install it. And again, here's some additional resources you can look at. There's a free Udacity Intro to JavaScript course if you want to get more practice. Codecademy, Learn JavaScript. Those are great beginner resources. This MDN official JavaScript documentation is amazing. They write this stuff very, very clearly, great examples, but it also goes very, very advanced and deep. And so it's a fantastic place to look at. Okay. All right, so now if we navigate into the homework folder, this is a has instructions for everything. So we're gonna do you're gonna have to do something called a Feynman writing prompt. It's named after this famous scientist that won a Nobel Prize, and what you're going to do is, or essentially the key idea is that you don't understand something unless you can explain it clearly to a 12-year-old. And so what you're going to do is you're going to create a text file, and you're just going to write out, this is just in English, just write it out, what is a variable? And just try to explain it in as simply as possible. And what you'll find is that when you try to explain something in as simple of a way as possible, it helps you discover the questions that you have about it and helps you find the things you don't understand. So, describe variables, describe strings, write out what a string is, write out what a function is, and the arguments, and the return statement, if statements, Boolean values, true and false. And so write this out and explain it as simply as possible. And so that's a fantastic exercise to help you really get this stuff down. The next thing is install Node and NPM. NPM comes packaged with Node. And then now, here's how we run the tests. So running the tests, this is something that people might get a little hung up on. So you're going to copy this command, npm run test:/JSI. And if you come into the terminal, I'm going to open up a new tab in the terminal. And this one, let me clear it. With here, I'm up in the root of the folder. So here's, lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Here's our node modules folder we downloaded. There's the package.json file. And so what we're going to do here, I'm zooming this in a little bit, is we're going to run our tests from this folder. And so it's going to be npm run, well, let me just paste it in, but it's npm run test:/JSI, and this is going to run the tests for the first assignment. If you did JS2, it would run them for the next assignment. So this just runs them for the first assignment. So initially, all the tests are going to be failing. So I run it, and it's going to come through. It's going to run a bunch of stuff, and we come down and we see 27 failed and 1 passed because I was playing with one a little bit earlier. But we see all these tests failed. You can scroll up and look at the specific tests. Okay, so now I'm going to go over to the other tab. I'm going to open up the actual homework file. So I'm going to go into the homework folder. Let's here's the actual homework file. This is the editor that I use. It's called Vim. I recommend you don't use Vim right now. As you get more advanced later on, that's something that you can get in and work on. But so for right now, don't use Vim. Use VS Code. So if we come down in, there's going to be instructions. So the comment has instructions on what you should do. It says create a string variable. It can contain anything. And so let new string. This one is just going to be a let right here. That's fine. So instead of null, I'm going to change the null. And then I'll change this to hello world. It could be anything you want. Okay. So then I'm going to save that. Make sure you save your file. If you save your file before you run the tests again, then it won't know your changes, and the tests won't change at all. So I just change that from null to hello world. Now to test it, I go back. I'm going into my other tab where I had the tests, and I'm going to run the tests again. I'm going to press the up arrow key. That brings the test back. Let me do a clear real quick just to bring it up to the top. But I'm going to run these again. npm run test:/JSI. And this is a lot of what you're doing today is figuring out how to even run the tests and the environment stuff. But that's really important stuff to learn. And that's why we're doing this, is so you guys can be familiar with getting GitHub, familiar with your computer, familiar with the environment and all this stuff before day one, because this stuff takes a lot of time to figure out. So if you get stressed out because it's taking you a long time to even get to the homework, that's fine, because that's part of it. Part of the homework is getting familiar with the command line, figuring out how to navigate around, figuring out how to do this, because this is really, really important basic stuff. So if you're not even getting to the homework for a while, don't even, don't stress about it, because this is part of the practice. Part of the practice is getting familiar with this. So we see now it says 2 passed. And if I scroll up, it has messages for all the other failed tests. They're for the things later on down in the file. So I'm going to just scroll past them. And I come up to the very top, and we see here's all these different failing tests. And we see here's return string, which I finished earlier before we got on our lecture, and I'll show you that in a moment. But here we have new string. Should be a string, and it's passing. It changed from a red X to a green check mark. And so now your job is to go through and get all of these red X's to turn into green check marks. The homework is finished when all of these X's are check marks and you have pushed your code up to your fork, okay? So add, commit, and push, the stuff we talked about yesterday, add, commit, and push. So you push your changes up, and then your pull request will be up to date. So turn the red X's into green check marks. You do that by following the instructions in the homework.js file. So let's come down and look at some of the functions on these first ones. You're just changing variables. But later on, in the next 22 problems, you're going to complete a function. So all of your stuff goes inside of the function. You have to make sure you are returning it. If you are using console login here, that doesn't affect the test. You have to return it. It says simply return the string provided. So this is what it looks like. And so we're just going to return the string that comes in. That's all we're doing in this function. Very simple. We're just going to say return str. To save that. Okay, and then come back over here to this other tab, scroll down to the bottom, run the tests again, and we see 2 passed. Okay, this is I went in and I made it pass again. So now let's go back to the other, so back to the editor. I'm going to come through. Now I'm going to do this add function. So, okay, X and Y are numbers. So X and Y will be numbers when this function is called. The code that is running the tests is going to call these functions. So we're not actually calling these functions. If you want to test it, you can take this code out and put it in JS bin and run it. That's that website, or in the Chrome editor. There's a lot of different places that you can run it. Lots of different websites that let you do that. And so you could copy this function out and take it out and put it in JS bin or something like that. But so in here, I'm going to do return X times, or sorry, plus Y. Okay, we're going to add it together and then return it. So now I'm going to save the file. So add X and Y together and return the value. So again, I could have also written it as, const sum is equal to X plus Y, and then and then return sum. That works too. Either way, I come in, rerun the tests, and now we see that 3 are passing. And so if I scroll up, there's a lot today, but it'll get easier to scroll up as you finish more of them. But we see that new string is a green check mark. Return string is a green check mark. Add is a green check mark. If you can't figure out why it doesn't work, you can go down and look at these failed ones. So like, so let's say like new num should be a number. Let's come back in this, like new number. Let's say instead of a number, I did this wrong and I said true. I made it a Boolean value. We save it. So I made this true instead of a number. It's supposed to be a number. But I run the tests again. We come back in. Okay, it still says that it's failing. So I can scroll up to the very top. We see, oh, okay, so it should be a number. Okay, so it's still failing. So now I can come down here and it's going to give me a more concrete explanation. So it says expected value to be number. So it expected to be a number, but it received a Boolean. So it's sometimes these can be kind of cryptic, but the computer is trying to do its best to tell you what's wrong. It says, I was expecting a number, but you gave me a Boolean. And so that can clue you in, oh, I put true instead of a number. So I got to change that. And so then go back to the editor. Okay, let's get rid of true. Let's put the number 15. So and then we save it. We have to save it. We come over. And then now let's run the tests again. All right, now we see 4 passed, 4 tests passed. So, you can scroll up again. And we see new num is now a green check mark. Okay. All right, so now I've made some changes. So now I can do get status. Let me, I'll do this in the other file. You got in my editor, but do my clear it up. I know I'm moving a little fast here, but you can go back and yeah. So for explaining the variable in the homework, don't write it out in the homework.js file unless you put it in a comment. You can just add another file into the folder called like, you can call it like, I don't know, homework.txt, like .txt or something like that, and then just edit it. And it explains that in the instructions. That's explained in the instructions. All right, so just make sure you read the instructions very, very, very carefully. Because if anything's off a little bit with computers, it won't work. And that's just part of programming. You always have to be so careful. Okay, so I made some changes. And if I type in get status, this is a review from yesterday, get status. We see homework.js has been modified. So now I can select the files I want to add. So I'm going to do get add homework.js. I type in get status. And it's green. So now it's been selected. So you can select the files and the changes that you want to do the commit on or the hard save on. So now I'm going to do a commit. Get commit -m, and then my new, or let's see, completed string function add function and some other problems. So just just write a little brief description. I'll hit enter. Okay, now I type in get status. All right, and now it says on branch master. We're ahead of origin master. That means the origin master refers to the place we cloned from. But then I just do get push, and that will go and anyway, that will go and add it. So you do get push, and that will go and add it. I'm actually not sure if I forked this. I'm pretty sure this is a fork, but I don't want to push in case it. I don't want to push in case it's pushing to the live one that you guys are working off of. So, or that if any of you haven't done the fork and clone yet. Okay. All right. So this is everything from today. This was a lot. So hang in there. You can come back and rewatch the recording. Just do as much as you can. Be a sponge. Do your best. Some of this is going to be really hard for you, especially if you're a beginner. That's totally fine. Oh yeah, let me talk a little bit too about editing the files. So there's a tool called VS Code. And you can come here and download it. This one's actually written using JavaScript too, or JavaScript as well. But so we come in here and you download it. It will automatically know what operating system you're on. So you just download it. I'm going to open it because I already have it downloaded. But then VS Code, and I have some other code stuff in here from a thing I was working on. But this is a code editor. And so VS Code, this is going to, this is a tool that you're going to use to edit the files, okay? And so what I can do here is I can go open, and let's see here. Actually, I might need to, let's see, 2 seconds. Let me figure out how to do this. So this will be a little different depending on just like your operating system and how you navigate through the file folder. The way that I do it, and there's some other ways you can do it here. Like you could do open and then navigate through and figure out where your stuff is. so I can go to Lambda school, and then let's see, here's the pre-course stuff I cloned down, and then so I'll hit open. I open the folder inside of here, and this thing is this is all the homework. So I can expand Intro to JS2, come in here. Here's the README, all the instructions. Look at the homework. Here's the homework.js file. You can see here's the stuff that I had edited from before. So again, I can come in here and I can change stuff. So new bool, let's set this one equal to true. Save it. All right, so that's a valid bool. I'm going to come back to terminal now and run my tests again. So I run the tests. Okay, all right, so 5 are passing now. Okay, so I can come back in here now, and I can come in and add more code and change stuff, and you just have to make sure you save it. When your code is not saved, the little icon up here is going to be a circle, and so you can hit Command S or Control S to save. You want to start learning hotkeys, where you can come up here to File and click Save, but try to use the hotkeys now. So then return X minus Y. So now let's go back to the terminal, run the tests again. Just press the up arrow key, hit enter. It's going to come through, run the tests again. Now we see 6 are passing. Okay, so now we're in a better spot. So then we just go through and edit them all in here. So VS Code, so use VS Code as the editor. Don't modify anything down below here. VS Code is a fantastic editor to start with. If you have a strong preference for a different one, you can use a different one. And we teach you about some different editors in our full course. Some stuff like Vim and Emacs and things like that. But if you've heard of those, but don't worry about that. Let's see, people use JS Fiddle. So yeah, you could use JS Fiddle or JS Bin or Replit, things like that to play around with the code. Okay. All right, so this is a lot today. So big thing you need to do, you need to download VS Code. You need to download Node. The instructions are in the assignment. It's all in there in the README. This main README talks about the assignment. You got onto the bottom and it talks about downloading Node. You look in this other README. Again, it tells you install Node and npm, and then work through and run the tests and fill out homework.js to make it pass. So again, make sure you have VS Code or some other editor. It's free. All of this stuff is free. And then Node and npm, you got to download that onto your computer. So again, a lot of tooling stuff today. A lot of just like figuring out your environment. So hang in there. That stuff can be really tricky. It's honestly, that's harder than writing the actual code for most of you guys. So like figuring out your workflow, that's going to be the hardest part for you guys. So hang in there. We went a little over on time. Well, a lot over on time, half an hour over. It's a lot of stuff to cover, but hang in there, do your best. Let us know if you have any questions. Again, this is the stuff that would get you ready for day 1. So this is the stuff that we expect all this stuff to be, people to have this stuff down. So on day 1 of our class, we don't take time to explain what a variable is or a function or things like that. For our full-time class, we're expecting our students to know it, and we hit the ground running with more advanced concepts. So if you work through our this mini boot camp over the next 2 weeks, you'd be in a great spot to start. That covers all of our pre-course work. And yeah, we still have some seats open. Some people, there were some people from yesterday who asked us about doing our course. So still have some spots. So if you're interested, I'd love to have you come and apply and come and do our class. Again, it's free until you get a job as a software engineer, making more than $50,000 a year. If you don't get a job as a software engineer within 5 years, or if you don't end up getting a job making more than $50,000 within 5 years of graduating, then you don't owe us anything. And so it's very much, it's designed to be forgiving. We want you to be successful with our course. And so we're and then if you have no interest in doing our course, we're happy to have you here. We want to give back to the community as well and provide this, and we want to help you guys decide if this is something that you want to do as a career, or or if you want to continue moving into this. So so this is a free service. We're going to continue to provide this, and we're happy to have you all here. And no pressure either way, yeah, we of course are going to talk about our full-time classes. So would love to have as many of you as want to come. We'll we'd love to have you guys. And so let us know if you have any questions, or if you're interested, please reach out to me or Austin. And again, if you're here in this live class, that means that you're in a good spot. That means that you have the desire, and the work ethic to cut it. So so if you're interested in applying, reach out to us, and we'll expedite you through that interview process, because it is coming up. The deadline is coming up. The start date is coming up. February 5th, I believe it's that first Monday. So, yeah, anyway, would just love to, anyway, so if you have any more questions about our course specifically, happy to answer it. All this stuff we're covering in 2 weeks is stuff we expect you to know before the start of day one. Day one, we dive into recursion and closure, and and we're talking like that first week. We're talking about stuff with the prototype chain. We're talking about very advanced JavaScript concepts. That's week one, and then we dive into data structures and algorithms. We get into HTML, CSS, and advanced DOM stuff, and mobile optimization, how to make a website look good on a phone and a tablet, and cover all of that. We get into React and how to build sophisticated advanced client-side web applications, so stuff like Amazon and Facebook and Twitter, and how to contribute to a team like that. Then we go into back-end development and cover how to do servers and databases and security and authentication, and how to do all of that, because that's where most of the logic happens in a website. It's happening on the back end on a server. And so we cover how to do all of that, password encryption and how to protect your database from hackers, and a lot of security stuff. And then we go into deployment, how to host your stuff like on AWS and Google Cloud Platform, and how to get your stuff out on the internet so people can access it. Then we go into mobile development with React Native, how to build native iOS and Android applications. Then it's CS fundamentals, operating systems, and C, and computer architecture, and data structures and algorithms again, but with C. So you're getting them in a more in-depth manner. Complexity analysis, lots of these different concepts. And then there's capstone projects, personal projects, lots of team projects. The instructors are fantastic. We were able to, it's a fun job. Instructors love doing it, and they love interacting with students. They love seeing your growth and success. And so we're able to attract a lot of great teachers. Every one of our instructors would be, at the very least, a senior level engineer, if not an executive at most other tech companies. Many of the instructors would be so like our most recent instructor and several of our other instructors were previously executives. One of them was offered a VP of engineering role, but he instead took our job as a teacher. And because they love to teach, and thanks to our investors, we can compensate our instructors, and we can pay to get amazing instructors here. And so it's really an incredible team. You'll be learning from people that have shipped code on the most competitive and professional platforms that are out there. Google, NASA, JPL, Blizzard, other game studios, lots of fun stuff. Interviewed a guy today works for the State Department, doing some different cool stuff with the government that might be coming on. But anyway, it's a lot of fun. Our students grow and learn a lot, and it's amazing to see their transformation in 6 months. So anyway, if you have any more questions, reach out to me or Austin, and good luck with your homework. Let us know if you have questions with the homework. We'll do our best to help out as much as we can. We have a few hundred other full-time students in our full-time courses we have to help too. But we come in and volunteer in here, and we have other members of our staff that volunteer, extra time to come in here and help. So anyway, just good luck, and then we'll dive into some more advanced JavaScript stuff tomorrow. And we'll talk to you guys later.